One reason we stop advancing our stories and instead consider changing our perspectives or building a new perspective is that we can't think of any way to advance our stories. Essentially, we're stuck. We're at an impasse. Sometimes the cue to depart from ordinary thinking and move into more creative ways of thinking can come from an impasse. You hit a brick wall. And I think a really nice story that illustrates this is the story of Burt's Bees. You've probably heard of the lip balm, right? But there's an interesting backstory there that involved a lot of frustration at the beginning. It all started when honey salesman Bert Shavitz met an out-of-work waitress, Roxanne Quimby, in 1984, and they decided to make some extra cash by making candles from beeswax. By the end of the first year, sales stood at $20,000. Really impressive for them at the time, but not enough to sustain a decent-sized business. The breakthrough, though, came when the duo started cooking up natural soaps and perfumes on gas stoves, while an accompanying lip balm became a bestseller. This was just a lip balm they sort of experimented with and added in as part of a package. And pretty soon the lip balm started outselling all of their other products. In 1991, the year the business incorporated, it was making 500,000 candles a year, as well as the natural soaps and perfumes. It also had 40 staff as orders started flowing in from across the U.S. Quimby, the beeswax seller, who initially talked about these early years of frustration, and he said in the early years he had some midnight of your soul type of times, as he put it. And one time he came home from work and he found the window in his cabin was blown in, snow was all over. It was 20 degrees below zero outside at 3 in the morning. He was broke. His car had just barely made it up the driveway before it broke down. And in that moment, he had this sense, right, that we talked about an impasse where the business wasn't quite working out. They really hadn't come up with that product that really hit. And he talks about his belief that, and I think this is really insightful, that success is just getting up one more time than you fall. And it doesn't come from one brilliant idea, but a bunch of small decisions that accumulate over the years. And I think that's a really wise insight there that really tells us that that you meet a lot of impasses along the way. You hit a lot of brick walls, but you have to really think of a way to profit from those experiences. And so part of the way that he profited from impasse was not being sentimental about any particular existing product. The product either sold or it didn't. And they tried lots of things. They hit a lot of brick walls. They encountered a lot of impasses. But eventually they hit on that beeswax lip balm that you probably know and associate today with Burt's Bees. And it was very clear early on as the lip balm started to sell 10 times faster than, for example, their beeswax furniture polish, that maybe that was the direction the company should take. Right, so as we saw with the example with Burt's Bees, sometimes impasses happen, and they can actually be helpful on this journey toward creativity. So I think we need to talk more about the idea of an impasse and how it relates to the creative process. So I think one place to begin was why does an impasse happen in the first place?
Yeah, and it's almost always a shortcoming of your perspective, right?
Yeah.
So your story is stuck.
Right.
The world is against you, or you don't have a very good understanding of what's going on, and you've got nothing left. Your perspective doesn't give you a way to use it.
You just kind of hit a wall.
Advance your story. Yeah, that's usually why perspectives happen. I mean, it could be somebody else saying no, right? It could be the world saying, there's a barrier.
Right. So the creative process could end there, right? But so then, right?
Absolutely.
I quit, right? So I think there's another, the important question asked is like, how, why could an impasse cue us toward creativity in particular?
No, absolutely, because I think often we rationalize away, right? Oh, I'm stuck, that's it, there's nothing I can do.
Right.
Or I'm unlucky, oh well, right? Or something like that. But instead, I think impasse can cue you to be creative, and I think that's largely because you think, well, there's got to be a way, right? And so you can think about, okay, I'm stuck, there's nothing I can do. Oh well, I give up. But you can also think, well, maybe there's something I'm not thinking of, right? What else could I be thinking about? And that's usually my story is stopping, and now I'm going back to my perspective and saying, what am I missing? What am I missing?
Right.
What else could there be?
So one assumes that there is a solution, and then the impasse really is a cue that clearly you're missing something, and so you have to go back and rethink and perhaps change the way you're thinking about things.
Exactly. Yeah. So if we take that hit of we're stuck to mean I give up, well, it's not a cue to creativity. Right. But if I take it as, is there anything else I can do? Is there anything else I'm missing? Well, then it might be. Right. And so that's how we could experience the same situation, but one could lead us to creativity and one could, one could not.
Creativity flourishes where impasses meet optimism, right?
Right.
And it sort of flowers from there.
But so and the other side is remember, this is impasse. So what happens normally? Normally, our stories continue.
Right.
And so there's this perverse thing about success.
Yeah.
Right? Which is if our stories are just continuing, we're not creative.
You don't have the opportunity to rethink.
Yeah,
or any cue that maybe rethinking is a good idea.
Exactly. Right. So we just continue on. So an impasse, by stopping your story, can make you think I should change my perspective. But if you don't have an impasse, you may never stop to rethink your perspective. You'll just keep going.
So speaking of perversity, I have a perverse question for you. If impasses are helpful for the creative process, how do we encounter them more often? What do we have to do? I feel like I encounter them enough, by the way, it's just every day, but maybe people at home are wondering.
You're a particularly creative person. So,
or ineffectual.
We have competence traps, right? Like I'm good at doing this and I'm good at doing it the usual way. And so I never experience an impasse because I'm pretty good at this and I just move ahead and do it. So what could make that flip for us and make us feel an impasse that could be fruitful by spurring us to change our perspective or build a new one? So the first one clearly we saw is you got to care about your goal, right? Otherwise an impasse is like, oh well, I give up, right? I don't want to expend the effort. So it does have a motivational element, right, that we have to care about what we're doing. And then there also has to be a self-efficacy piece, right? I have the capability to get through this. Right? So I'm stuck, oh well, I'm bad at this, I'll give up.
And then maybe a certain amount of enjoyment for the task itself, right?
Absolutely.
That, I like doing it, and so rather than being purely frustrating, it's a challenge.
Right. But also the nature of the goal matters. So not only do I feel like I can achieve this and I care about my goal, but what is the goal? So if your goal is to do a little bit better than yesterday, you'll probably do basically the same thing you did yesterday.
Right.
But if your goal is to be, at a whole different level, well then maybe there's no other way but to rethink it. So Google is probably famous for that, right? Not 10% better, but 10 times better.
Right.
And you can maybe do the ordinary thing faster and get 10% better, but you're not going to do the ordinary thing and get 10 times better. You have to rethink it.
Right. And like some of our most admired, companies we can point to with strong cultures talking about big, hairy, audacious goals was from the Collins and Porras book. I think is very much
same idea. Same idea. It forces you to rethink.
Right.
The way you normally think about it's never going to get there. So the other piece is you can acknowledge constraints, right? So if to experience an impasse, you have to bump up against something.
Right.
And so by noticing where you're constrained or limited, you're going to realize that's a direction in which your story is stuck and stopped. So there's sometimes a tendency to think, oh, creativity is about freedom and lack of constraint. But actually, the constraints themselves are what create the impasse.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And so that's a way that they can be helpful. And the last one is conflict, right? So you say no, and I say yes, and now we're at an impasse.
Right. So seeking out people who are different from you, who have different perspectives, maybe going to places where people think differently, you bump up against these blocks, right? When you think, well, maybe what I assume to be true doesn't quite work here. And it's a cue and a signal that maybe I need to rethink my own perspective.
That's right. That's right. So one cue that we can try to be sensitive to is the impasse. Getting stuck is an opportunity. Take it.